I sat frozen at my tiny kitchen, the cream-colored envelope still trembling in my hand. $40 million. That's what it said. From an aunt I barely remembered. A mansion, land, art, all mine. But before the ink on that letter even dried, the messages started. Thief, fraud, gold digger, and then the knock on the door. When I opened it, there he was, my ex-husband, after 15 years of silence, smiling like he'd never left. What he said next didn't just shatter me, it made a courtroom judge laugh out loud. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The letter came in a thick, cream-colored envelope, the kind that felt too heavy for regular news. Alyssa almost didn't open it. It had no return address, just her full name, Ms. Alyssa Jane Cole, centered in old-fashioned script that made her stomach twist. She sat at the edge of her tiny kitchen table, the envelope unopened between her fingers, coffee growing cold in her mug. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence like a distant engine. Finally, with a shallow breath, she slid it open. Dear Ms. Cole, we are pleased to inform you that you are the sole beneficiary of the estate of Lucy Faw Harrow. Her breath caught. Aunt Lucy? She barely remembered the woman. A rigid, pearl-wearing ghost from one long-ago thing. Estrange didn't even begin to cover it. Alyssa read the letter again, slower this time. 40 million. Mansion, liquid assets, art, land, all of it, hers. The estate lawyer's contact information was listed at the bottom in tight serif font. Everything about the letter screamed legitimacy and finality. You realize what this means, right? Naomi said later that night, leaning across the table in their shared apartment. Her eyes were sharp, guarded. $40 million is like blood in the water. Every failed cousin, half-sibling, ex-boyfriend, they're gonna smell it from 10 miles away. Alyssa tried to laugh, but it came out dry. You think they'll contest it? Not now, but money like that? It doesn't just sit quiet. You just lit a bonfire in the middle of a swamp. The first time Alyssa saw the Harrow estate, it felt like she'd stepped into the life of someone she was still pretending to be. The gates groaned open under the weight of time and revealing a long gravel drive that curved into thick oak woods. The mansion emerged slowly from behind the sprawling, stone, and arrogant in the way old money always. Ivy clung to its bones like it was trying to pull it back into the earth. Eric's truck crunched over the gravel behind her. He parked, killed the engine, and leaned out the window. You sure about this? Alyssa nodded, but her knuckles were white on the handle of her suitcase. The house loomed like it was judging her. Inside, dust swam through slanted light like something alive. Covered furniture stood like ghosts in every room. The air smelled of lavender and old paper. She wandered through halls that echoed her footsteps back at her, wondering how Lucy could have lived here, alone, unreachable, until death. Eric hauled in the last box and wiped his brow. Place gives me the creeps, he muttered, setting down a box labeled Alyssa, journals, letters. You see that upstairs library yet? Floor-to-ceiling books, like a movie. She hadn't, and part of her didn't want to. Something about the house felt staged, as if Lucy had left it all behind waiting for a final audience. By morning, the news had exploded. Local woman inherits $40 million from eccentric heiress, read the local Chronicle headline. Her inbox flooded. Old college classmates, strangers asking for loans, DMs from people pretending they'd known her in childhood. One email subject line simply read, "You stole that money." Alyssa stared at the screen, stomach in freefall. She hadn't done anything except open a letter, but the tone had already shifted, from curiosity to resentment. One message read, "Enjoy your blood money, you selfish little fraud." Another, "She promised that estate to me. You'll pay for this." She closed the laptop with shaking hands. That night, alone in Lucy's cavernous, Alyssa sat in the flickering candlelight. The power had gone out during a thunderstorm, and Eric had left to check on a generator he swore was around back somewhere. The wind moaned through the cracked kitchen window. She reached for her tea, but her hand froze midair. There, on the floor just outside the kitchen doorway, a faint, wet footprint, barefoot, small. Alyssa hadn't walked in from the rain. She wasn't the only one inside the house. It was just after noon when Alyssa heard the knock, not a frantic banging, but 3 calm, deliberate raps, confident, like the person on the other side already knew they'd be let in. She paused halfway down the stairs, heart thudding, hands still dusted in flour from trying to bake something, anything, to quiet her spiraling nerves. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, the trees shivering in the wind like they were bracing for something worse than rain. When she opened the heavy front door, Ethan was already smiling. "Hey, Liz." His voice was the same, warm, almost sheepish, as if it hadn't been 4 years since she'd watched him walk out of her life with a duffel bag and the last shred of her trust. She didn't move, didn't invite him in. "You're not supposed to be here," she said flatly. "I saw the article," he said, hands in his jacket pocket. "Kind of hard not to. You made quite a splash." "I didn't ask for this," she muttered. He gave her that familiar, half-tilted grin, the one that used to mean, "Come on, don't be mad." Only now, it read like mockery. "I figured you could use a familiar face, someone who actually knows you." Before all this, she stepped aside, almost without thinking. A mistake she'd regret in 20 minutes. The kitchen looked warmer than she felt. The generator Eric found had kicked the lights back on, but they still hadn't figured out the central heat. Ethan leaned against the counter like he belonged there, like he had every right. "You living here now?" he asked, glancing around. "For now," she said, "until I figure out what comes next." He nodded slowly, eyes tracking the ceiling beam, the antique copper pots hanging in a row. Then, casually, too casually, he said, "I talked to someone at the county clerk's office last month." Alyssa's shoulders tensed. He took a sip of the tea she hadn't offered him. "I was getting some paperwork for my new place, but something weird came." "Ethan, they never finalized it, Alyssa. The divorce. It never legally went through." Silence dropped like a guillotine. She stared at him, heart stuttering. "That's not possible. We signed everything." "I signed," he said. "And I thought you did. But looks like the court misplaced something. Judge died a week later. Whole docket was reassigned. Clerk said it's rare but not unheard of." "You're lying." He met her eyes calm. "Look it up." Alyssa didn't wait. An hour later, Naomi's voice crackled through the Bluetooth speaker in the library, breathless. "Okay, I hate to say this, but he's right." Alyssa blinked hard, staring at Lucy's massive desk, suddenly far too large and far too old for the mess of digital chaos in front of her. Her laptop screen showed an open court record. Case, Cole versus Cole. Pending reassignment. "Technically, you're still married," Naomi said. "And you inherited everything during that time." Alyssa didn't reply. Her fingers curled slowly into fists. That evening, Ethan lingered in the sitting room, idly flipping through one of Lucy's leather-bound books. Alyssa stood by the window, watching the last of the day fade charcoal. "You always were a runner," he said softly, without looking. "New name, new place. Didn't even call when your mom died." Her mouth tightened. "We built a life together," he added. "I'm not saying I want back in, but I think it's fair I get a slice. You wouldn't even be here if not for all we went through." When she didn't answer, he looked up. Her expression was unreadable, cold, focused, like she was already 10 moves ahead of him on a chessboard he didn't know he'd stepped on. Finally, she spoke. "I don't owe you anything." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You sure about that?" She didn't blink. That night, Alyssa dug through one of Lucy's old filing cabinets, not for estate records, but for something else. A set of property deeds. She wasn't sure what she was looking for until she found the locked drawer. The only one with her name etched faintly into the brass plate. A.J. Cole. She stared at it for a long moment. Then a floorboard creaked behind her. She turned, and there was a shadow in the doorway. Not Ethan. The shadow in the doorway vanished when Alyssa spun around, flashlight beams slicing the air. Nothing. No sound. Just the groan of the old house settling into its bones. Her breath fogged in the cold, her pulse racing against silence. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, Naomi was already texting. "We need to meet. Today." Not over the phone. The office belonged to a probate specialist in downtown Charleston, a narrow building wedged between a bakery and a vape shop, with frosted glass windows and peeling paint. Naomi had found her through a friend of a friend who'd once survived a messy estate battle involving a Florida tech billionaire and 3 wives. Inside, the office smelled of dust and lavender floor cleaning. The specialist, Lenore Daniel, wore burgundy-framed glasses and an expression that said she'd seen it all and hated most of it. She flipped through Lucy's will, highlighting in practiced strokes. "It's a solid document," Lenore said. "Very clean. No signs of coercion or tampering. Executed in front of 2 witnesses and notarized." Alyssa exhaled slightly, shoulders relaxing. Then Lenore flipped to the final clause. "However." Naomi leaned in. "Don't say however like that." "What however?" Lenore tapped the page. Your great-aunt included a provision, standard for people of her generation. If you were legally married at the time of inheritance, your spouse could have a claim under South Carolina's community property statute, especially if any assets were acquired or improved during the marriage. Even estranged spouses can challenge that if the divorce wasn't finalized. Alyssa's blood turned. Naomi sat back, muttering under her breath. Jesus, Ethan wasn't bluffing. If he files before the estate is fully transferred, it's a mess, Lenore continued. If he can prove a valid marriage and you can't produce dissolution papers, you're exposed. Alyssa stared at the highlighted paragraph. Her name, typed cleanly. To my great-niece, Alyssa Jane Cole, I leave the entirety of my estate, provided she is not legally encumbered by marital ties at the time of probate. She felt sick. They walked out in silence. Naomi finally spoke in the parking lot, digging into her purse for, we've got options. Expedited divorce, jurisdictional petition, maybe push back probate by claiming due process violation. I'll talk to a litigator. Alyssa nodded, but her eyes were unfocused, locked on a man across the street snapping at his phone. He turned quickly, walking away. Did you see that? She said. Naomi didn't turn. See what? By sunset, it was everywhere. Heiress reunited with ex-husband days after fortune windfall. Divorce? What divorce? Ethan Cole speaks on their rekindled love. Photos of Alyssa and Ethan outside the Harrow estate, her looking tired, him with that smug PR smile, had landed on 3 gossip blogs and a trending Reddit thread. Eric forwarded her a TikTok from some influencer dissecting her marriage like it was part of a reality TV arc. Her inbox went from hate mail to death threats. Gold-digging witch, you didn't earn that money. Still married, huh? Does Lucy roll in her grave or just burn in hell? She stared at the screen, numb. Her throat felt tight. Her fingers hovered over the reply button, then dropped. Naomi called at midnight. His lawyer reached out. They're reviewing his marital entitlements under the Harrow estate condition. That's legal speak for? They're prepping a lawsuit. Let them, Alyssa said quietly. There was a pause. Naomi softened. You okay? No, Alyssa said. But I will be. She hung up. The next morning, the mansion felt colder, lonelier. She walked through Lucy's old office, tracing her fingers along the edge of the locked drawer with her. She needed that key, not just to the drawer, to Lucy's secret. Lucy wouldn't have left that clause in by accident, not with Ethan in. Alyssa turned toward the tall bookshelf. There, barely visible, one of the books had no title on the spine. A different color, slightly misaligned. She tugged it free. It wasn't a book. It was a hollowed-out case. Inside, a brass key. Just as her fingers closed around it, she heard the front door open. Not knock. Open. Her blood froze. She hadn't unlocked it. The door creaked wider, letting in a burst of cold wind and the faint smell of wet leaves. Alyssa gripped the hollowed book in one hand and the brass key in the other as she stepped into the hallway. Her bare feet made no sound against the old hardwood. Eric? She called out, voice steady despite the adrenaline threading through her spine. No answer. She reached the foyer. The door was ajar, but no one was there. Just the wide porch, the gravel drive, and a single envelope resting neatly on the welcome mat. She picked it up, heart thudding. No name, no postage. Inside, a folded printout of a tabloid headline. Heiress hides secret husband. Sources say it's a money grab. Scrawled in thick black marker across the top. You were never supposed to win. By morning, Naomi was already at the mansion, laptop under one arm, a half-eaten protein bar in the other. We're not letting this go to settlement, she said, as she dropped onto a kitchen. He's banking on intimidation, public opinion, and delay. Classic narcissist playbook. Alyssa slid the envelope across the table. Naomi didn't flinch. We push harder. Alyssa's jaw clenched. He left me with $43 and a wrecked Civic. I'm not giving him a dime of Lou's estate. Not now. Not ever. Naomi smiled grimly. Good. Because I just filed a motion to challenge standing. If we can argue fraud, or prove he knew about the divorce error and waited to exploit it, we might be able to block him from touching any of it. Won't be easy, Alyssa said, voice low. No, Naomi agreed. But neither are we. Later that afternoon, Eric pulled up in his dusty Silverado with coffee and a lead. I know someone who might help. Used to date a paralegal at the county family court. She's smart, discreet, and hates people like Ethan. Her name's Shelby. Alyssa raised an eyebrow. Your ex? Technically, yes, Eric said. But it ended in an adult way. She still answers my texts. Alyssa gave him a tight smile. That already puts her ahead of Ethan. As the day wore on, the house creaked under the weight of old secret. Alyssa was organizing more of Lucy's documents when Valerie, Lucy's longtime housekeeper, arrived with a tin of shortbread cookies and a plastic-wrapped meatloaf. You shouldn't be alone in this place at night, Valerie said, setting the food down. Alyssa smiled faintly. I'm not. Valerie wiped her hands on it. Lucy always said trouble runs in bloodline, said when she left it all to you, she knew there'd be sharks, said she had to make sure you'd be ready. Alyssa turned curious. She told you that? She told me everything, Valerie said, eyes sharper than Alyssa. Lucy knew this. That's why she left you more than money. She left you instruction. That night, in the library, Alyssa unlocked the drawer. Inside, old letters, a black fountain pen, and a leather journal with gold edges. On the first page, in Lucy's elegant cursive, the past always circles back. Hit harder. Alyssa sat back in the old leather chair, flipping pages. The entries weren't in order. Some were dates, others just names. Some were pure rage, written in quick, jagged loops. But one entry stopped her cold. He won't stop her. He never had the spine, but he'll try to own her the way he tried to own. Her hand trembled. Lucy had known about, not in theory, specifically. Alyssa slammed the book shut, heart pounding. The next morning, Naomi called from the courthouse. We got a hearing date, next Thursday. Family probate division. Bring everything, paperwork, journals, anything with Lucy's hand on it. Alyssa nodded slowly, standing in front of the Harrow Estate's long hallway mirror. Her reflection looked sharper, tired, yes, but different, leaner, carved from resolve. She was about to hang up when Naomi added, oh, and tell your friend Eric to be careful. Why? Shelby says someone's been asking around family court record, specifically about your divorce, but not through legal channel. Who? She's not sure, but they're offering money. Alyssa's grip tightened on the phone. Outside, the wind picked, and someone knocked on the back door. The knock at the back door came again, firmer, this time. Alyssa opened it cautiously, her hand still curled tight around her phone. Ethan stood under the rusting awning, umbrella dripping, suit pressed like he hadn't been smeared across the internet. I brought coffee, he said, lifting a to-go tray like this was some reunion. I didn't ask for any. He gave her that worn-out grin. You used to like the kind with cardamom. She stepped aside, wordless. He walked in, too comfortable, setting the tray on the granite island like he'd never lost the right. Valerie, who was chopping carrots at the far end of the kitchen, barely acknowledged him except to clench her jaw. Ethan turned to Alyssa. I'll make it simple. I want 12. 12 what? She asked, though she already knew. Million, cash, out of court. No more press, no hearing, no appeals. You get your piece back. I get what I'm owed. Naomi burst in from the hallway, coat half on. What the hell did you just say? Eric followed close behind, jaw already tight. He didn't say anything, just stood next to Alyssa with arms folded, eyes locked on Ethan like a warning shot waiting to go off. Ethan held up both hands. Easy. I'm making this pain for her. Naomi looked like she might actually throw something. You think we're negotiating with you? You try to scam your way into her inheritance, smear her name, leak photos, and now you want to settle? I'm offering mercy, Ethan said, turning back to Alyssa. We both know Lucy wouldn't want her estate dragged through a courtroom, and if we go that route, things get ugly. Your inbox won't survive discovery, neither will your name. Alyssa said nothing. She didn't need to. The silence spoke for her. Glacial, unreadable, absolute. Valerie wiped her hands and finally looked up. Her eyes were calm, but her voice was a quiet scalpel. Lucy expected this. Ethan blinked. What? She saw you coming before you even left the first time. He scoffed. She didn't even know me. She knew enough, Valerie said, unbothered. She recorded everything, even her deathbed instruction. Alyssa turned sharply. She what? Valerie nodded. She was meticulous. Audio, video, files. You think she didn't plan for this? That woman documented her grocery runs, let alone a $40 million transfer. If there's any doubt about what she wanted, Lucy would have made sure it was clear. That night, Alyssa and Naomi tore through the library, stacks of books, drawers full of letters, vintage boxes labeled paid bills from as far back as 1979. The fireplace crackled, casting shadows that flicked across old portrait. Lucy, in her 20s, arms crossed in front of a Rolls-Royce. Lucy on a boat. Lucy with a stranger whose eyes looked vaguely. Hours passed before Alyssa found it. A small, lockable media drawer built into the wall panel beneath the eastern bookshelf. Dull silver handle. A worn label taped across the top. In the event of nonsense, Naomi let out a low whistle. You're kidding. Alyssa ran her fingers along the edge. No keyhole. Just a digital pad and a small, blinking green light. A biometric reader? We're not cracking that without help, Naomi muttered, already pulling out her phone. I'm calling Shelby's guy. He freelances as a digital archivist. I'll have him here by morning. They stood for a moment, breathing in the heavy quiet. Outside, the wind screamed against the house like something clawing to get in. Naomi broke the silence. You still thinking about Ethan's offer? Alyssa shook her head. He offered 12. Lucy left me 40. So, I'm going to make sure it costs him everything. At 2:13 a.m., Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from her contact. Drawers custom, high-end, definitely something valuable. But heads up, someone else hired me to ask about it 2 days ago. I didn't bite. You've got a leak. The tech guy arrived just before dawn, wiry, yawning, with a laptop bag covered in cryptic stickers and a Diet Coke already half drained. His name was Mason. He didn't ask questions. Custom drawer, biometric pad, proprietary firmware. He mumbled while kneeling by the library shelf. Whoever built this had trust issues and deep pockets. Alyssa hovered nearby, arms crossed, heart thrumming in her. It took him 20 minutes. Then, click. The panel released with a soft mechanical sigh. Inside, a sleek black hard drive labeled Final LH, coiled in velvet like it was something sacred. Mason looked up. Whatever's on here, she wanted it found, but only by the right person. They gathered in the study. Naomi plugged in the drive, fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard. Eric hovered near the window. Valerie stood by the fireplace, face unreadable. The screen blinked once, twice. Then Lucy, not the cold-eyed matriarch from faded photos, but raw, human, and fierce in her hospital. No makeup, her hair pulled back, a silk scarf around her neck. Though it couldn't hide the skeletal sharpness, she looked directly. If you're watching this, I'm dead, and Ethan goddamn Cole is trying to sink his claws into something that never belonged to him. Alyssa's breath caught. I met that man once, Lucy said, voice clear despite her frailty. It was enough. He was slick, smiling, like mold hiding under wallpaper. He shook my hand too long, looked at my paintings too closely. I asked one question, what do you do? And he gave 4 answers that meant nothing. She coughed, once, then leaned closer. He's not here for love. He's not here for you. He's here for leverage. Let this recording be proof. I saw through him, and I made damn sure the law would too. Alyssa's throat tightened. Lucy paused, lips curling in a ghost of a smirk. Use this as proof of intent. And for God's sake, Alyssa, don't settle. Hit harder. The screen went black. No goodbyes, no tears, just Naomi exhaled slowly, already pulling up court temp. This is gold. Direct character evidence, first-hand statement, ironclad chain of custody since the drawer was sealed and secure. Alyssa's voice was quiet. Will the judge allow it? Depends who we get. But yeah, if we file fast, we can enter it as a preemptive motion before Ethan sets the narrative. Valerie still staring at the screen with that woman never left anything to change. By noon, the motion had been filed. 2 hours later, Ethan called. Naomi glanced at the caller ID and laughed without answer. He upped the offer, she said after 18 million, lump sum. He wants an NDA, gag clause, mutual withdrawal of claims. Eric looked up from his phone. That's panic money. Alyssa didn't hesitate. Tell him no. Naomi blinked. You sure? You could... I don't want hush money, Alyssa said, steady as a blade. I want him humiliated. I want every smug smile wiped off his face in a courtroom he thought he could control. Silence followed. Then Naomi said, copy that. 2 days later, the clerk called. Judge Castillo will hear your motion in full. Friday morning, you'll be first on the docket. Naomi's mouth twitched into a grin. That's a win. He doesn't waste time on soft case, and he hates con artists. Alyssa nodded, standing by the window of the study, staring out at the long, winding drive. Below, a car sat parked at the edge of the gate. Again, no movement, just tinted windows and the hum of an engine. They're watching the house, she said. Eric stepped up beside her. They want you rattled. Alyssa didn't flinch. Then let them watch me walk into court and burn him to the ground. Later that night, Alyssa returned to the library alone. She opened Lucy's journal again, flipping past half a dozen entries until she found one she hadn't noticed before, dated just 2 weeks before Lucy's death. He thinks the law is about money. It's not. It's about memory. And I never forget betrayal. A soft thump sounded above her, faint but deliberate. A floorboard in the attic. Someone was still in the house. The podcast episode dropped on a Tuesday morning. By noon, it had over 600,000. The Broken Husband, My Truth, with Ethan Cole, was 39 minutes of perfectly calibrated spin, soft piano music, a sympathetic host who'd clearly been fed talking, and Ethan's voice, tender, cracking at the right moment, faux humble, where it counted. I'm not trying to take what's hers, he said gently. I just loved her, and I guess part of me still does. A beat. Then, she didn't even come to my mother's funeral. That's the kind of person we're dealing with. I just want what's fair. The backlash came like a storm front. Gold Digger Gate trended by evening. TikTok lawyers debated a state law with out-of-context clips. Someone posted a screenshot of Alyssa's voter registration and claimed she was an anti-family radical. Another said she was being investigated for tax fraud. All false, all viral. By midnight, her phone number had been leaked. By 2 a.m., so had her home address. A message popped up in her inbox. We know where you sleep, thief. Eric was the first to hit back. He logged into his decade-old Twitter account and posted a photo from 3 years ago. Alyssa on a curb, holding a flat tire in one hand and a Wendy's Frosty in the other, laughing in the pouring rain. My sister had $43 in her account when Ethan left her. She fixed her own car, built a new life, and now some manipulative coward is crying into a podcast mic because he didn't make the cut. Miss me with that. The tweet exploded. 3 million views by morning. Influencers flipped. Reddit threads reversed. TikTok duets poured in. The tide slowly began to shift. Valerie watched it all from her phone in the kitchen, unreadable. Then she looked up at Alyssa and said, "It's time." Alyssa glanced over. "Time for what?" "To testify," Valerie said softly. He reached out to Lucy in 2019, said he was in debt, that his mental health had suffered because of the divorce, asked for $250,000. Alyssa froze. "She never told me." "She didn't want you to hate him, said you'd already spent enough time carrying his shame." Naomi stood in the doorway, jaw tight. "If we get that on record, and the court hears that Lucy saw through him twice, it's over." "I'll swear it under oath," Valerie said, word for word. By Thursday, the hate mail slowed, but the threats didn't. Packages arrived at the gate. One was just a framed wedding photo of Alyssa and Ethan, broken glass. The word homewrecker scrawled across her face in permanent marker. Another was a stuffed fox with its eyes gouged out. No note. Naomi called the sheriff's office and had 2 deputies stationed nearby. "This goes from civil to criminal real quick," she said. "I'm not letting some keyboard stalker scare you into backing off." But Alyssa didn't. She was already working through Lucy's files, highlighter in one hand, a legal pad in the other, building timelines, cataloging letters, marking discrepancies, calm, focused, tired, but sharper than she'd ever been. Eric passed by the study once, holding a sandwich, and just paused to watch her. "Whatever happens in that courtroom," he said, "you already beat him." Alyssa looked up. Not yet, but soon. Friday morning came fast. The courthouse buzzed with quiet press vans clustered outside the gates. A camera drone hovered above like a mechanical buzzard. Inside, in the hall outside Judge Castillo's courtroom, Naomi paid, phone glued to her ear. Valerie sat on the bench beside Alyssa, holding her purse in both hands. Across the hall, Ethan's lawyer, smug, silver hair, trying not to. And then, Ethan, dressed in a slate gray suit, sunglasses on indoors, like the villain in a mid-budget crime show who still believed he was the hero. He didn't look at Alyssa. He didn't need to. He knew she'd already won something he couldn't touch. The room. As the bailiff opened the courtroom doors and began calling the docket, Alyssa stood slowly, spine straight, expression calm. Naomi whispered beside her, "You ready?" Alyssa nodded once. Then she leaned in and said under her breath, "Let's ruin him properly." The courtroom was already full by the time Alyssa stepped inside. Reporters lined the back row, eyes flicking between their phones and the door. Legal interns whispered over. A court sketch artist sat perched like a hawk near the front, her pencil already moving. And then there was Ethan. He walked in through the side aisle like a man arriving for an award show. Navy suit tailored tight, hair freshly cut, smile locked in place like a campaign poster. 2 men followed, his attorney, Graham Sloan, and a younger associate clutching a stack of papers like a shield. Cameras outside the windows flashed against the glass. He took his seat at the petitioner's table with ease that made his stomach twist. He still believed he could win. But today wasn't about belief. It was about Alyssa entered quietly, flanked by Naomi, Valerie, and Eric. No entourage, no smirks, No theater. Just wait. Judge Castillo entered seconds later, tall, blunt-featured, with tired eyes that said he'd seen more entitlement in a month than most people saw in a lifetime. He scanned both sides with cool detachment and said simply, "Let's make this fast and honest. No circus, no delays. Gavel down. Showtime." "Your Honor?" Sloan began, rising smoothly. "This is not a case about greed. It's about fairness. My client, Mr. Ethan Cole, remains the legal spouse of Ms. Alyssa Jane Cole due to a court processing error. As such, under South Carolina's community property statute," Castillo raised a hand. "We've read the motion. Get to your ass." Sloan nodded. "He is entitled to 50% of the Harrow estate. $20 million. A gasp rippled through the room. Alyssa didn't move. Valerie barely blinked. Eric crossed his arms. Naomi just smiled faintly, the kind of smile that sharpened knives. When Sloan sat, Naomi stood. "Your Honor," she said crisply, "we're not here to discuss marital paperwork. We're here to establish intent. Specifically, Mr. Cole's intent to defraud, manipulate, and exploit both a legal technicality and the wishes of the deceased." She turned to the bailiff. "Permission to introduce video evidence. Exhibit A. Recorded statement from decedent Lucy Farspur Harrow." Castillo waved it in. "Let's hear it." The lights dimmed slightly as the courtroom monitor blinked to life. Lucy's face appeared. The same hospital bed shot. Same scarf. Same eyes that didn't forget. "If you're watching this, I'm dead. And Ethan goddamn Cole is trying to sink his claws into something that never belonged to him." A woman in the second row gasped audibly. "He's not here for love. He's not here for Alyssa. He's here for leverage. Let this recording be proof. I saw through him." The room froze. Lucy's voice dropped to a whisper, cold and deadly. "He's a slippery lead." The judge leaned back in his chair. When the screen went black, Naomi turned back to Castillo. "Intent, Your Honor. Malicious, calculated, and specific. And the deceased made provisions to protect her heir because she saw this." Graham Sloan stood slowly, half panicked. "With all due respect, this is an emotional appeal?" "Sit down," Castillo said, not raising his voice. "We'll get to your rebuttal. First, I have a question for your client." Ethan shifted. "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you return to contact Ms. Cole before or after learning about her inheritance?" Ethan hesitated. Ethan shifted. "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you return to contact Ms. Cole before or after learning about her inheritance?" Ethan hesitated. Just a breath too long. "After," he finally admitted, voice low. "In your podcast," Castillo continued, "you said you came back because you missed her. But in your court filing, you referenced the estate value 5 separate times." Ethan opened his mouth. Sloan interrupted. "Objection? Overruled." Castillo's tone hardened. "Mr. Cole, on record. Why did you reestablish contact?" The room was silent. Even the court reporter paused for half a second. Ethan looked at Alyssa. She didn't look back. He swallowed. I found out about the inheritance. I thought maybe things could be fixed." Naomi leaned in. "There it is." Judge Castillo looked down at his notes, face unreadable. Then he tapped his pen twice and said, "We'll resume testimony tomorrow. I'll allow witness statement, including that of the housekeeper. Counsel, be ready." Gavel struck. Court adjourned. As the courtroom emptied, Ethan lingered by the aisle trying to catch Alyssa's eye, but she walked past him without a glance. Outside the courthouse, a reporter shouted, "Alyssa, are you scared of what he'll say tomorrow?" Alyssa paused, turned toward the cameras. "No," she said. "He should be." By the time Alyssa arrived the next morning, the courthouse steps were a press gauntlet. Boom mics, shouting voices, flashbulbs snapping like lightning. Naomi walked ahead, shielding Alyssa with her. Valerie followed close behind, quiet and steady. Eric, stone-faced, stayed one step behind them on the wall. Inside, courtroom 2B buzzed with a different energy. No one whispered. Everyone was waiting. Ethan sat with his shoulders back, hands folded in front of him like he'd been coached into meek. But his eyes scanned the room with the hunger of a man losing altitude. Fast. Judge Castillo entered and dropped the gavel like a verdict. "Let's proceed. First witness." Valerie stepped into the box like someone entering a church. Composed, resolute, reverent. Naomi stood. "Please state your name for the record." "Valerie Ann Rowe." "And your relationship to the late Lucy Harrow?" "I was her housekeeper for 22 years, but she called me her friend." Naomi nodded. "Did Mr. Ethan Cole ever attempt to contact Miss Harrow during your employment?" "Yes, once. November 2019. Gasps stirred in the room. Ethan stiffened. Valerie continued without looking at. He emailed the estate line, said he was Lucy's future nephew by marriage, asked for $250,000, help rebuild his mental and financial stability, said Alyssa had left him in a bad place. Naomi turned to the judge. We have printed records of that email. Your Judge Castillo gestured. Admit them. Sloan shot to his feet. Objection. This is character assassination with no bearing on the legal. Sit down, Castillo snapped. You've already had your turn. I'm listening. Naomi walked slowly across the room. Did Lucy respond? She printed the email, wrote no across it in red marker, then put it in her nonsense file. More murmurs. Valerie didn't flinch. And to your knowledge, had Lucy ever approved of Mr. Cole? She didn't trust him from the beginning. She told me, he's got liar eyes and elevator, said he smelled like a man who could ruin a woman's credit and her peace in the same week. Even the court reporter paused to stifle a laugh. Naomi smiled faintly. Thank you. No further question. Graham Sloan rose slowly, rearranging his cuffs like a man reloading. Miss Rowe, you say this email was written in 2019. That's 5 years ago. Yes, Valerie replied evenly. Is it possible your memory is flawed? Or that Ms. Harrow misunderstood his intentions? Valerie leaned forward, calm and dangerous. I scrubbed blood out of her nightgowns when the cancer got mean. I sorted her meds. I held her hand when she didn't remember her own name. She may have forgotten a lot of things at the end, but she never forgot who she didn't trust. Sloan hesitated. Valerie added, and I still have the printed email. With Lucy's notes. Castillo raised an eyebrow. Bring it up. The bailiff walked the evidence forward. A creased, water-stained printout. Lucy's handwriting in red ink was unmistakable across the top margin. No, grifter. Castillo let out a short breath. Not subtle, was she? Naomi shook her head. No, Your Honor. She just believed in plain language. Ethan fidgeted in his seat now, his smile long gone. His lawyer leaned in, whispering quickly. But the damage was already done. Castillo leaned forward. Mr. Cole, we'll be hearing your testimony next. You'll have a chance to explain everything. Ethan nodded once, but he looked paler now, smaller. Court recessed for 10 minutes. In the hallway outside, Naomi pulled Alyssa aside. That was perfect. Valerie didn't just dismantle his credibility, she buried it under granite. Alyssa exhaled, but her eyes were still locked on the courtroom doors. He's going to say something reckless. Naomi smirked. That's the plan. As they returned to the courtroom, the bailiff announced, next witness, Ethan Cole. He stood slowly, brushing imaginary lint from his jacket, and walked to the stand with all the confidence of a man who still believed he was the smartest in the room. But as he was sworn in, Alyssa noticed it, the twitch in his jaw, the flicker of hesitation, and then she remembered Lucy's words. He'll talk too much. People like him always do. Let him. She sat back, ready. The courtroom settled into a heavy hush as Ethan adjusted the microphone in front of him. The oath had been administered, the stakes laid bare. But Judge Castillo didn't give him the floor. Instead, he gestured toward the clerk. Before we proceed with Mr. Cole's testimony, I've received one final piece of documentation from the decedent's estate. The clerk stepped forward and handed over a sealed envelope, parchment-colored, old-fashioned, with Lucy's looping signature pressed in red wax. Castillo turned it over once, studying it. This letter, he said, was submitted under a sealed instruction, to be opened only if Ethan Cole contests my will. He gave Ethan a flat, unreadable glance. That moment has arrived. The tension in the room shifted, a taut thread about to snap. The judge broke the seal. Lucy's handwriting was bold, even in old age. Castillo cleared his throat and began to read aloud. To whom it may concern, but especially to the greasy little man pretending he loved my niece. A wave of laughter broke across the courtroom. Even the sketch artist smirked and jotted something quickly. Ethan's jaw tightened. If Ethan Cole is present, contesting what was never his to begin with, allow me to clarify a few things since the cancer got to me before I could say them in person. First, Ethan is not entitled to a penny of my money, nor the lint in my coat pocket. He is a man who couldn't commit to anything but selfishness. He walked out on my niece, and now crawls back like a raccoon sniffing at garbage. If you're still unsure of my intent, let this letter remind you. I saw through him the moment he tried to talk art with me and called a Monet a nice watercolor. Alyssa stifled a laugh behind her head. Eric didn't bother. He burst out, then cleared his throat and sat straighter. Even Judge Castillo fought a grin. She had a gift for clarity. He looked over the letter one last time. Miss Cole, he said, eyes meeting hers. Do you have any further objections to this document being entered into the official record? None at all, Your Honor. He turned to Ethan. Mr. Cole? Ethan's lips parted, but no words came. Then let the record show, Castillo said. This court recognizes explicit, consistent, and well-documented intent of the deceased to disinherit Mr. DePera. Ethan Cole. A long pause. Accordingly, your claim to the Harrow estate is hereby denied in full. For a moment, silent. Then Ethan slammed his hands on the stand. She manipulated her, he shouted. That old witch turned her into some kind of puppet? Mr. Cole, Sloane hissed, but Ethan was already rising, voice climbing. This is a setup. A trap. She left it all to her niece to punish me. You think that's justice? You don't even know what she was like. Mr. Cole? Castillo said firmly. You are out of order. None of this is legal. This is all smoke and mirrors and lies. 2 security officers were already moving. Sir, please step away from the bench. Ethan threw up his hands as they approached. Oh, sure. Drag me out. Just like she wanted. Everyone worships the dead bitch with a checkbook. The entire room recoiled. Alyssa didn't move. Security flanked Ethan, each gripping an arm. You're going to regret this, he yelled, now fully unhinged. All of you, Enough, Castillo snapped. Remove him. As Ethan was escorted out, Naomi leaned toward Alyssa and whispered, There's our soundbite. The doors slammed shut behind him. Judge Castillo sighed, then adjusted his glasses and addressed the court. This behavior, coupled with the inconsistencies in Mr. Cole's sworn statement, leads me to consider sanction. He looked down at the transcript before him. There is a strong possibility that Mr. Cole knowingly submitted false information during both his podcast appearances and legal filing. Therefore, he paused, then continued. This court will refer Mr. Cole for contempt proceedings and possible perjury charges. Gasps echoed again. And we will revisit his credibility in a separate evidentiary hearing. He struck the gavel once, hard. Court is adjourned. As people stood and began to file out, Alyssa remained seated. Naomi rested a hand on her voice soft. It's over. No, Alyssa said. Not yet. She looked at the sealed journal still in her bag, the one Lucy had marked, last words, deliver if necessary. Outside, Ethan was being loaded into a police car. Inside, Alyssa stood slowly and whispered to her, Next, we ruin his name. The Harrow estate was too quiet. Alyssa stepped out of the car and stood still, letting the wind press against her hair tugging loose from its braid. The gravel beneath her boots crunched like dry ice. Above, the clouds hung low and heavy, as if they too were holding their breath. Court was over. Ethan was gone. But the war inside her hadn't. Not yet. Inside the foyer, the warmth hit her like a memory, the smell of lemon oil and old wood. The faint echo of Lucy's opera records from the sitting room. Long sigh. The place felt still, but not empty. She dropped her bag by the staircase and stood in the center of the grand hall, closed her eyes. Let herself feel every ounce of the exhaustion, the pressure, the grief she hadn't dared touch. Victory, it turned, was just as heavy as loss. Eric found her in the kitchen 20 minutes later, holding a chipped teacup Lucy had kept above the stove for decades. You good? He asked softly. She didn't answer right away. Then, I'm tired. I figured. He opened the fridge, pulled out a half-wrapped sandwich. You want to talk about it? No. He nodded, but before he walked out, he paused at the doorway. You did good, Les, he said. Not just for you. For all of us. You cleared the family name. You made damn sure nobody rewrote Lucy's legacy with a podcast mic and a pity. She looked at him. I wasn't trying to be noble. Didn't have to be, he said. You were just honest. That's enough. Later that evening, Naomi stopped by, files under one arm and a worn tablet in the other. I got 3 podcast offers, she said, sliding onto the velvet sofa. One's from a women-in-law platform, another from a true crime ethics. The third is sleazy, but huge. Alyssa didn't even look up from the fireplace. She was feeding old receipts and burned legal drafts into the flames, one by one. Tell them no, she said. Seriously? Naomi raised an eyebrow. This is your moment. You could own the narrative, control the press cycle. I don't want the narrative, Alyssa said. I just want my life back. Naomi studied her for a moment, then, without protest, began typing a round of polite decline. You're a unicorn, she muttered. Woman wins a $40 million estate and turns down a podcast. Alyssa smiled faintly. Some wins are meant to be private. By the following week, Valerie had quietly moved into the estate's guest wing. She didn't ask. She just arrived with a suitcase, a crock pot, and a folded American flag she said had belonged to her father. I'll stay a little while, she told Alyssa as she unpacked canned soup into the pantry. The place needs order, and so do you. Alyssa didn't argue, she didn't want to. At night, Valerie cooked while Alyssa sorted through Lucy's journal, trying to decipher the shorthand. Eric replaced light bulbs and fixed a leaky pipe in the West Hall. Naomi drafted a plan to set up a scholarship in Lucy's name, small, local, and fiercely selective. The world, it seemed, was moving forward. Ethan didn't. He vanished after court, deleted his social media, his name stopped trending. A few tabloids ran grainy photos of him leaving a motel in Jacksonville, Florida. Others claimed he'd left the country. No one confirmed anything. Alyssa didn't care. The real victory wasn't his silence, it was that it no longer mattered. One night, as rain tapped the windows and Valerie snored lightly from the far wing, Alyssa sat alone in the library. She opened the final journal, the one Lucy had labeled "Deliver if necessary." Inside were 6 handwritten pages, part biography, part confession, part warning, but the last paragraph stopped her cold. If you're reading this, it means he tried to lie. Good. That means I was right about him. Now ask yourself something, Alyssa. What if he wasn't the only one? Her fingers tightened on, and in that moment, the next question wasn't what if he came back. It was who else had been watching the estate all along. The cafe was neutral ground, downtown Charleston, bright, public, safe, walls lined with old concert posters, the scent of espresso thick in the air. A bell jingled when Alyssa walked in, her coat still damp from the late October drizzle. She spotted Naomi first, seated near the back by the window, sipping a latte and pretending to scroll through email. The second chair across from her was already taken. Ethan. He looked smaller than she remembered. Not physically, but something in him had collapsed. The suit was gone, replaced with an untucked flannel shirt and jeans that didn't quite fit. His hair had grown out just enough to look unkempt. The mask of performance was cracked, but not gone. She sat across from him without speaking. Naomi closed her set it beside her cup, and leaned, silent, present. Ethan offered a small, fragile smile. Thanks for coming. Alyssa didn't answer. He looked down at the coffee in front of him, both hands wrapped around the paper cup like it might hold him together. I wanted to say I'm sorry. She said nothing. I know I messed up. Badly. And the court stuff. It got out of hand. But that wasn't me. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Alyssa studied him. His eyes were wet, but it was the kind of moisture that came from shame, not sorrow, like someone who'd been caught, not changed. He continued, voice softer. When I left, I thought I was doing what was right, for both of us. I wasn't ready to be who you needed me to be. I didn't need you to be anyone, she said quietly. I needed you to stop lying. Ethan winced. I was scared. I lost everything. My job, my name, my friends. You tried to take mine. He looked away. A long pause passed filled with clinking cups and cafe chatter and everything they would never be again. Finally, Alyssa spoke. I'm not here for your guilt, Ethan. He looked up. I don't want it. I don't need it. And it doesn't buy you any. His hands flexed around the cup. Just one chance. One last one. Not for the money. Not for the press. Just to fix things between us. As people. No. I mean it, he said, voice rising slightly. I'm not asking for reconciliation. Just peace. Just to know that you don't hate me. Naomi leaned forward. You don't get to ask for clean slates, Ethan. I wasn't talking to you. Wrong move. Naomi's expression didn't change, but her presence sharpened like a blade being You don't get to talk to her like you used to, Naomi said coldly. Not anymore. Ethan looked back at Alyssa, desperation leaking through his smile. Liz, please. And then he stood, reached out, tried to hug her. But Naomi was already up. Her arm blocked his reach, firm and final. That's not going to happen, she said. Ethan froze, hands half extended, posture wilted, defeated in front of half a dozen strangers watching the scene unfold. Alyssa stood calmly. I came here to end it the right way, she said. You didn't. And with that, she walked past him, out the door, into the drizzle, free. Outside, the air smelled like petrichor and eucalyptus. The world moved on without drama. No applause, no collapse, just her, breathing. Naomi caught up a moment later. You okay? Alyssa nodded. More than I've ever been. From inside the cafe, Ethan stood at the window, watching them go. But they didn't look back. It rained the morning the final hearing was not a thunderstorm, not a cinematic downpour, just a steady, stubborn drizzle, like the world was trying to wash away what remained of the fight. Alyssa sat quietly beside Naomi in the Charleston probate court, hands folded in her lap, the the scent of wet leaves drifting in through the window. No cameras this time, no headline, just the judge, the clerk, a thin stack of paperwork, and a gavel, ready to close a chapter. Judge Castillo reviewed the file with a certain reverence, flipping through stamped affidavit, Lucy's original will, and Naomi's most recent filing. His brow never furrowed, his voice never rose. When he finally looked up, his tone was almost calm. This court confirms the Harrow estate has been lawfully and finally granted to Ms. Alyssa Jane Cole as sole beneficiary, per the wishes of the deceased and all submitted testimony. He paused, then added, and this court sincerely hopes this is the last time we hear Mr. Cole's name. The gavel came down, firm and final. It was over, really over. Naomi gave Alyssa's hand a quiet squeeze. Now comes the hard part. Alyssa glanced at her. What? Deciding what you'll do with people. That afternoon, back at the estate, Naomi oversaw the final asset transfers like she was conducting a symphony. Wires confirmed, business accounts established, documents notarized and couriered before the ink had dried. Eric helped haul the last boxes of legal files out of the study. I still don't know how you kept all this straight, he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. I almost got sued for a parking ticket last year. Alyssa smiled faintly. It helped to have something to fight for. Naomi arched a brow. And what do you want to fight for now? Alyssa didn't answer. Not yet. It came to her that night, as she passed Lucy's old writing desk and saw the last page of her final journal propped against a candle holder. Don't just inherit the money, inherit the fight. By sunrise, the foundation paperwork was filed. The Harrow Fund, a selective scholarship for women in South Carolina pursuing degrees in law, literature, or leadership. Naomi read the mission statement and exhaled. She'd be proud. She'd be mad I made it sound soft, Alyssa said, grinning. I'm revising the second paragraph to include the word ferocity. Eric laughed. That's more like it. Later that week, he picked up the keys to a sunlit brick storefront near the bay. The windows were dusty, the interior smelled like cedar and dust, and he looked more alive than she'd seen him in years. He'd been carving. Now, finally, Hollow and Grain Studio would open in 2 months, half workshop, half gallery. My name's not on a he said, but I'm still building some that'll outlive you always were, Alyssa told. Now it just has walls, Valerie did. She didn't even mention leaving. Instead, she began cataloging every letter, photo, receipt, and recording Lucy had kept over 6 decades, archiving the Harrow legacy like it mattered, because it did. Someone has to remember the truth, she told Alyssa one morning, and the best time to write history is before someone else lies about it. A week later, Alyssa signed the paperwork naming her estate historian. Valerie just nodded. Good. Now let's talk about converting the West Wing. The last thing Alyssa did was rebuild the front gate. The iron was cold and stubborn beneath her gloves, but she shaped it herself. With Eric's tools, Valerie's blessing, and Naomi's playlist echoing from the Bluetooth speaker near. When it was done, she stepped back and looked at it. Harrow black steel, carved in Lucy's original signature. No initials, no qualifiers, just the name. Want me to weld 40 million reasons to regret underestimating me underneath it? Eric joked. Alyssa smiled. Tempting. She stood there a long moment, letting the breeze run through her hair. Not watching for, not listening for ghosts. Just standing. Still. Whole. But that night, long after everyone had gone to bed, Alyssa returned to the library. She reached for the final file. The one Valerie hadn't touched. Inside. Photos. Letters. Newspaper clippings. One with her mother's name. Another, older, with a date Lucy had written over before Alyssa. A note was tucked into the folders. In Lucy's handwriting, one day, you'll need to ask who else wanted it all, and why they let Ethan walk in the front door. A chill ran down Alyssa's spine, because she finally understood. Ethan hadn't acted alone, and Lucy had always known the estate was never just about money. It was bait. The road curled along the Oregon coast like a ribbon of salt and silence. Alyssa drove with the windows down, the sea air slipping through the car like a breath of something older than memory. Her hands rested lightly on the wheel. There was no destination, not really. Just the need to be somewhere quiet that wasn't the house, the courtroom, or her own mind. She hadn't told anyone she was going. She'd left Valerie a note on the kitchen counter, written in her slanted, sleepy handwriting. Taking the coast for a day. Don't call unless the mansion burns down. The cliffs rose steadily as she followed the shoreline. Below, waves crashed in slow rhythms against black rock, throwing up sprays of white foam that dissolved before they reached the sky. Gulls cut across the air like punctuation marks, and far off, The sun filtered through a layer of fog that never quite lifted. She found the overlook around noon, a crooked, grassy outcrop with no sign, no railing, and just enough space for one parked car. It felt untouched, like a place people forgot to ruin. Alyssa climbed out, the wind tugging gently at. She carried only Lucy's final journal, the one marked "For the End, if you ever get there," and a single red rose from the estate's winter garden. She walked to the edge of the bluff and stood there for a long while, letting the ocean roar beneath. Then she opened the journal. The last entry was dated just 6 days before Lucy's passing, and unlike the others, this one wasn't a warning, or a riddle, or a preemptive defense. It was something gentler, a kind of farewell. We spend so much time building walls, we forget what doors feel like. I've done enough fighting, so will you. One day, you'll win, but don't let the fight become the only thing that make peace with your past, but never invite it in. Let it stay outside. Knocking. Alyssa closed the journal, fingers curled around its spine like she might never open it again. Then, without ceremony, she stepped closer to the edge and let the rose fall into the wind. It tumbled once, caught an updraft, and disappeared into the sea. She didn't cry, not out of strength, but because it no longer hurt to remember. Back in the car, she stared at the cliffs for a moment longer before picking up her phone. She opened her messages and tapped a thread that had always been pinned to the top. Alyssa, let's meet at the estate tonight. Dinner's on me. A moment later, Naomi's reply arrived, quick as ever. Naomi, as long as it's not soup again. Alyssa laughed, really laughed, and slid the phone into her jacket pocket. The drive home was quiet. The sun broke through as she crossed back into South Carolina, casting the world in soft gold. The trees were turning, the air was colder, but everything ahead looked strangely clear, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like something was chasing her. She was simply going home. The ribbon was burgundy, thick as a seatbelt, and stretched across the newly refurbished archway of the Harrow Foundation entrance. The building, once the carriage house on the estate's southern edge, had been gutted and reimagined. Soft lights, wide windows, shelves lined with volumes on law, leadership, and literature. Above the doorway, cast in hand-wrought iron, was the foundation's motto, "Lead without permission." Alyssa stood behind the podium, fingers brushing the note cards she wouldn't use. The crowd in front of her was a warm mix of faces, local students, state judges, journalists, and a few former adversaries turned cautious allies. Naomi stood to the right of the stage, arms crossed, chin lifted. Eric flanked the soundboard, wearing a tailored jacket over a t-shirt that read, "Wood is good." And Valerie, regal in navy, sat in the front row beside the mayor, sipping from a thermos that definitely wasn't filled with. Alyssa took a breath and began. Lucy Harrow didn't believe in legacy as something you inherit. She believed in legacy as something you earn. Not because you outlived your enemies, but because you outloved excuses. A few people chuckled softly. Alyssa went on. She taught me that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something no one thought you could. And then, standing beside it with your name carved into the stone, she paused, scanning the room, eyes landing on young women in borrowed blazers, a few wearing worn shoes but standing taller than anyone else. This building doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't fix what was broken, but it proves something, that silence is not the same, and that peace, once earned, doesn't ask you to stay. Applause rose like tidewater, not explosive, but deeply felt. As Alyssa stepped down from the podium, Naomi met her at the base of the stage, holding a frame wrapped in brown paper. "You earned this too," Naomi said, peeling back the paper and revealing a cream-colored judgment letter embossed with the court seal. At the top, in thick black print, Ford v. Monroe, dismissed with prejudice. Alyssa smiled. "When did this come through?" "This morning," Naomi said. "Judge Castillo signed it himself." Apparently he laughed when he read Ethan's last appeal. Alyssa raised an eyebrow. "Judge laughed?" Naomi grinned. "You didn't." From the first row, Valerie leaned forward and whispered, "Lucy would have popped champagne right here and told the mayor to go to hell if he tried to stop her." "I'll do half of that," Alyssa said. Valerie handed her a glass. "Then do the second half later." As the crowd drifted toward the refreshment table, Eric stepped onto the small stage with a plastic flute of ginger ale in one hand and a mischievous gleam in his eye. He raised it high. "To letting go," he said, and cashing it. The room laughed, not politely, but freely. Alyssa tilted her head back and joined them, But an hour later, when the speeches were done and the lights had dimmed low for jazz music and bourbon, Alyssa slipped out the side entrance. She followed the flagstone path to the garden, the one Lucy had built in the last year of her life, carved into a corner of the estate like a whispered secret. The rosemary was overgrown, the lavender had bloomed late, but the bench beneath the willow tree still held its shape, its weight, its meaning. Alyssa sat, hands in her lap, the night air cool against her. No cameras, no press, and the sound of leaves brushing one another like old friends who knew how to keep quiet. She stayed like that for a long time, not waiting for anyone, not remembering everything, just being. Finally, she reached into her coat pocket and took out a folded piece of paper. Lucy's final line, copied. She didn't read it again. She didn't need to. She whispered it to the night as the breeze lifted her hair. You don't need revenge when you have the last word and the last laugh.